So literally, I don't know if it was hours or maybe a day after we recorded the last episode of Buzzcast, a ton of stuff hit the newswire about Audacity. And so we want to make
Newswire.
sure the newswire. I don't know, what do you call it when like
Who's
news.
putting out PR press releases about like Audacity purchased by Muse?
Breaking news. Audacity is spying on you. Well, I mean, that's what everybody was saying. So like a lot of the podcast editor groups, like Facebook groups that we're a part of, like people that are really plugged into like the software side of podcasting, were raising this big fuss about Audacity's new privacy policy. So just to catch you up to speed real quick, Audacity was created as an open source audio editing platform that people could contribute to, similar to Wikipedia. And it was like this constantly evolving and growing piece of audio editing software that people from around the world, developers from around the world could contribute to. Then they got purchased by a company called Move. Is that the name of the company? Muse. Muse, yeah. like the British rock band. So they acquired Audacity, and then as a part of that acquisition, as they started implementing some new changes, they updated their privacy policy. And that's where a lot of people got spooked, wondering, okay, what is really going on? What is this company Muse doing? Why is the word Russia showing up? And what are they actually collecting? So Albin, kind of get us up to speed on what the privacy policy update was all about. And then we'll just kind of take it from there and talk through, should you keep using Audacity?
I mean, without going into like all the detail, there's stuff in there about they actually get your IP address, especially looks like in relationship to bugs and crash reports and issues. IP addresses are held for 24 hours, but IP addresses can pretty close identify you. They often don't maybe get the device, but they can get, okay, this is a person in this house or at this coffee shop kind of a thing. So you're right to feel a little weird if people are collecting your IP address. And there was a lot of other language, though I know this to be pretty boilerplate. I think a lot of people saw like, we will only disclose this to third parties if we are legally obligated to, or if there's a crime. And so people are thinking, oh my gosh, are they sending my audio files and like scanning them to see if like I committed a crime, and then they'll turn me over to the thought police if like whatever I said was not acceptable? I think the fear level got jacked a little too high, and I think it's fair to bring it back down. That's pretty normal. Like if a court orders you to turn something over to help solve a crime, yeah, you have to turn it over. Which is standard. It's going to be in every privacy policy you've ever not read and just clicked through and accepted the terms and service. So I'm not too worried about that one. But the concerning piece is that it was open source software and then it was bought by a company. So it's not like the software is now copyrighted by this company, but the main version of Audacity, which everyone was contributing to, is now controlled by a company that at least there were hints that they had interests of trying to figure out how to monetize it or sell Audacity.
Well, and specifically to use data from Audacity's users as something they could sell in the same way that social media apps sell information to companies to make money.
I understand that was what people were concerned about. I think the actual fear that could be legitimate is that they were using information. They would use information like the average person who downloads Audacity uses it 3 times a week in the process of selling what they just recently bought. The wrinkle here is that open source software is like what you said. Wikipedia is kind of close. A lot of people are working together to write a book. And there's one person who's the publisher who's actually like printing the books and handing them out. But the words would not be copyrighted. And so anybody could do that. And so they do control, the actual printing of the book and handing it out. But that's not stopping anyone else from, in open source software, forking the code base and saying, all right, we've all been working on writing this book, and now it looks like this Muse company might be doing something we're not okay with. Whether or not it's legitimate or not, just putting that aside, the open source community can always just fork it, and there's seems to be a ton of response that they have, and there will just be Audacity and Audacity Taylor's version or something.
And just to be clear, in the open source software world, when Alvin says fork something, it just means make your own copy and develop your own version of it from there. So Muse might have some changes that they want to make, but at any point somebody can step back in the code base, like before they made those changes, make a copy of it, and then distribute it however they want, because the code is open and available for anybody to use and build upon. And there's a whole bunch of fun stuff that goes in and can happen when that happens, but somebody's in charge of the project, right? So usually what happens is somebody will create a fork, they'll do some enhancements, and then they'll submit those changes back to the master branch, and then whoever's in charge of the project can say that's something we want to accept into the main product, or we don't. And so when you don't, that's when you end up with a whole bunch of different versions of something, and you can pick and choose whatever flavor you want. But there's always one main thing, and that's what Muse bought and is now in charge of. And so they get to decide what goes in and what goes out. And one of the things that they put in was some changes to the privacy policy, and the fact that they are going to collect a little bit of information about how you use it. It seems like most of it is diagnostic information, which is pretty normal for software to collect when you use it. The norm recently, especially in the Apple world, has been you've been able to opt in or out of providing diagnostic information. If you've set up an iPhone lately, if you set up any software through the Mac App Store, you'll see that they have to ask your permission now, but that's an Apple guideline. Before you can request diagnostic information or crash reports from a user, they have to say, yes, you can send that data. Muse does not, or Audacity and Muse as the owner don't have to follow those rules because they're not distributing it as an app or through the App Store. They can just do it however they want. People are a little concerned about that. Overall, I think this is actually great that people care, right? Privacy is becoming more and more of something that people are starting to think about. And we should be cautious whenever software that we're using or websites that we're visiting or podcasts that we're listening to are collecting information about us. It's good to have a general understanding that this stuff happens, and we should be informed on what they're collecting and why they're collecting it, right? So I think it's great that people are asking these questions. We probably don't need, like, there were some panicky conversations happening in Facebook. Like, I'm going to delete it. I need to find new. Can
we just pause for a second?
Yeah.
You're stressed out that an app is paying attention to you and is collecting data about you. So you ran to Facebook to let everyone know how upset you were that this app was sending crash reports. The entire time, Mark Zuckerberg is like pulling every piece of data he can out of you so that he could serve up like the world's most targeted ads right back to you.
Right.
The worst offender of this is Facebook. So if you're really concerned, which I think is a good thing, maybe consider reducing your Facebook or maybe eliminating your Facebook use.
Good point. But it's happening a lot in the podcasting world as well. There are some other, I don't know if I want to, whatever, I don't care. Like Art19 is really big into targeting. Megaphone, which is owned by Spotify, is really big into targeting. I should say, if I'm going to say who owns Megaphone, it's Spotify. Who owns Art19 is now Amazon. They just bought them. They're into targeting, so they're trying to figure out everything they can about everyone who's listening to a podcast so they can target ads as precisely as possible. Yeah, it's not great. And so I say, yeah, like, ask the questions, figure out which data you're sharing, who you're sharing it with, and we should all have boundaries and lines and maybe at some point government regulation around this stuff. But the Muse case, it's not abnormal. Just because it's not abnormal doesn't mean that we should totally accept it with open arms. So let's keep having the conversations. Although at this point, from what we've heard, what we've seen and read about, it just seems like it's mostly diagnostic information, which it's not being commercialized yet. And so that's kind of that's like level one is, are they commercializing or trying to monetize my personal data or using it to impact or affect my buying decisions, to advertise to me, to target me? They're not doing that yet. It sounds like right now they're just collecting the information for the purpose of making the software better. Let me say this as a general good advice warning from somebody who's in software development. Don't unless you know what you're doing, unless you're a software developer, unless you understand open source software, unless you trust whoever's pointing you to a URL or a download, do not go out and search for third-party or variant forks of Audacity that promise no Muse tracking. All right.
Yeah.
Because what can happen is, since it is an open code base, anybody can take that, they can put whatever they want in it, and then they can compile it and put it on a website that says, this is the best version of Audacity to use this one. None of them are official. And when they're not official, you don't know what's in there. And so these forks are great for people who want to go back in the code base themselves. They want to remove anything that they don't like. They want to compile a version for themselves, and they want to distribute it to maybe some of their friends. But just doing a general Google search and trying to find a variant of Audacity that doesn't have this tracking in it is a pretty dangerous game to play.
You could
know
end
what
up with
you're doing.
something much creepier or
Yes.
actually malicious.
And if you want to enter into the wonderful world of non-destructive editing, then you can check out software like Descript or GarageBand or Hindenburg or Logic Pro, essentially anything except for Audacity, which will let you easily go back and undo mistakes after you've saved a project. It makes it easier to edit podcasts. So if you have some budget to go out and get a nicer software, Audacity, it does work, but there are other softwares that are much better. And we have a bunch of resources on our blog. So we'll leave a link to that in the show notes if you want to go and check out those other softwares to see if that could be a better fit for you.
We've got a bunch of discount codes inside of Buzzsprout if you want to try any of them out.
That's right.
This
That's
episode's not sponsored by Hindenburg or Descript, but maybe it should be, because there's a lot of there's some discount codes in there for you.
Hey, Travis here. We hope you enjoyed that clip from Buzzcast. If you want to listen to the entire episode, you can listen to the audio version in your favorite podcast app, and we'll leave a link to that in the description below. Or if you want to watch the video version, you can find that on our Buzzcast YouTube channel. So you can just click the subscribe button right up here to go and get new episodes as they come out every other week. Or you can click this image down here to watch the full version of this episode. We hope you enjoyed it, and until next time, keep podcasting.